Peterborough Select Board meeting for March 29th, 2022. This evening's, first, untitled award. With me are at the table are Bill Kennedy and Bill Taylor, fellow Select Board members. Jesus. Please stow your phones. Is
that me?
Is it
That's you.
Also, Nicole McFay, town administrator, is at the table, along with Chief Ed Walker from the Fire Department, Fire Rescue. And we have several members of the Budget Committee in the audience, and if and when they do speak, please just remind everybody of your name for the record. And again, and if anybody does have a question or would like to add comment to the discussion, again, state your name for the record. Tonight's agenda will start off with the proposed bond for a fire and ambulance facility / municipal campus design and engineering. And then when that wraps up, we hope you'll stick around because we do have some other business to attend to. Nicole's looking to put together a request for congressionally directed spending off to Senator Shaheen's office for this fire and ambulance facility design and engineering. And then we'll vote to extend the transfer of title, the title date of the remaining Southfield properties up till April 29th, 2022, and authorize the town administrator to execute all documents related to the sale of the same. And then new business will vote to approve trust fund expenditures from the Police Department Capital Reserve Fund and the Albert Noone Fund. I guess that's why Chief Kennard was here. And then we'll vote to appoint, maybe we'll vote to appoint Mary Covington as a member of the Affordable House Committee on the related to the EDA. And then we have minutes from February 15th and March 1st to approve. With that, let's open up that public hearing.
Okay. So again, just to remind everyone, we are here tonight because we, of course, needed to amend down the bond request rather than being appropriation for $23 million to gross appropriate for a municipal facility and fire and ambulance, municipal campus and fire and ambulance facility off of Elm Street, because unfortunately the cost of the project came in much higher and the expected federal match, federal grant programs that we were expecting to come along with the infrastructure bill did not come to pass. We found ourselves in a position where we would be unable to afford the bond that would be necessary for the project. So at the budget, after the budget bond hearing, the Budget Committee and the Select Board voted to amend down that warrant article from $23 million to $2 million for the purpose of designing and engineering the municipal campus and fire and ambulance facility located off of Elm Street. We, after that meeting, and of course, well, before that meeting and the run-up to it, we were working with bond counsel to make sure that it would be appropriate to do so. After some back and forth discussion, she agreed that it would be appropriate to do so because you're not asking for any more than what was originally proposed in the bond, you're amending it down. She just wanted to make sure that there would be an opportunity for the public to weigh in on this new proposal, and so she suggested that we hold one more public hearing before the deliberative session. And so that's why we're here tonight. So up on the screen right now is the language of that new warrant article. You can see that again, that's a gross appropriation of $2 million. And that is for the purpose of designing and engineering a municipal campus and fire ambulance facility located off of Elm Street, to authorize the issuance of not more than $2 million of bonds, and also to authorize the selectmen to issue, negotiate, sell, deliver those bonds and notes, determine the interest rate thereon and other terms, and also to authorize the Board of Selectmen to apply for, obtain, and accept federal, state, or any other aids, grants, gifts, or revenue sources that may become available for this project, and to comply with all laws applicable to that project, and so on and so forth. We would also need $50,000 raised for the fiscal year 2023 bond payment. Okay. So that is the short of it. The intent of this is to go through another selection process for an architect and engineering or engineering firm to work on this. We are looking for the $2 million is 12% of the estimated project cost, and that is in line with what we are seeing on other projects, based on and that estimate is based on the cost of the construction and site work that we received through the process that we recently went through.
So with that statement, are you saying that we're going to scrap what HTK has done? HKT has done so far and find a new firm?
We're not scrapping it. We would have to do this anyways. If you're receiving any federal funds, they require you to put every step of the project out to bid. So this would be the next step in the project. It would have had to go back up to bid anyways. As we're going to discuss later, we are seeking federal funds for this project. In fact, we already have federal funds that we may be applying to this project in the shape of the ARPA money that you've already received and are looking to set up the expendable trust fund for. So because you're using federal funds, you have to follow the letter of federal purchasing requirements. And one of them is to put everything back out to bid. So we will be doing that. It's not that we're scrapping HKT's work. We are using that as the basis for the next step in the process.
Okay, good, thank you for clarifying that.
We also own that work.
Yes,
Right.
yes, we do. What you see up on the screen right now is the estimated bond schedule. And I know it's very small print, but this is included in your packet. We are estimating, and this is coming from the New Hampshire Municipal Bond Bank, 1.75% interest rate over the 5-year life of this bond. This bond, because it's a bond for the preliminary expenses and not the actual construction, the bond itself must mature within 5 years from the date of issue. That's per New Hampshire RSA 33:3-C. And so, just to put that into perspective, the impact on your tax rate will be 6 cents in the first year, assuming that that is the interest rate that we do get. The New Hampshire Municipal Bond Bank is usually pretty careful when they put out these estimates, so we're probably going to get right around that 1.75%. That will be a 6 cent per thousand increase on the tax rate in the first year for that first $50,000, and then 49 cents for the next couple of years, diminishing slightly as we pay off the principal. Pay off the principal, you have reduced interest. So what would that mean for the average person? If you own a $300,000 home, that will cost you $18 in the first year, and for the remaining years of the bond, about $147, again diminishing as the bond matures.
I have a question. If we have the ARPA funds and we already decided we're going to use them towards this project, do we need a $2 million bond or do we need a $1.3 million bond?
We don't know that we're going to need a $2 million bond.
I know that.
We may not need any bonding whatsoever if we are successful with the application for the earmark or some of the other funding that we're seeking to secure. That is a maximum amount. So there is flexibility in how those funds get used. It may be that when we come back to the select board to try to figure out what makes the most sense, how we want to spend that trust fund money or that money that we're going to be putting in the expendable trust fund. You may want to hold on to it till later in the project. You may think of it as a contingency. You may want to apply it to a different part of the project. So by essentially keeping us open to $2 million, a maximum of $2 million, that gives the select board a lot more flexibility to make what will be the right decision in the future.
I have a question. Are these funds going to be against what's known as the soft cost of the project at all?
Yes, absolutely. So architecture, engineering, permitting, all of those things are considered soft costs.
So these are, okay.
Yes.
Any more to present?
No, that's really all of it.
That's enough.
Yeah.
Any other questions from the board?
All right, just a second. I
All right.
might have one after Ron goes.
All right, who's first in the audience? Ron?
Ron McIntyre. I just want to clarify, looking at the second sentence, for the purpose of designing and engineering a municipal campus, may we assume that what that means is one of the outcomes from spending this $2 million is that we are going to have construction documents in plan.
Yes.
That means the engineering will have been completed, all of the construction documents from that will exist.
Yes.
So that is implied in this statement.
Yes, that is exactly correct. So what this will get us is, to use the term, shovel-ready. We will be shovel-ready at the end of this, and that is the goal.
All right, thank you.
And for the record, Ron's part of the Budget Committee. I think I saw Carl's hand up, Chair of the Budget Committee.
Thank you, Tyler. First, I have to say, I thoroughly endorse this warrant article because since we were unable to pursue the full amount of the construction, this keeps us moving, and I think that's really essential as opposed to what we've seen in some other towns where they rejected a fire station proposal and then they were frozen for a year. So I endorse it largely for that reason. Clearly, Peterborough needs a new fire station. I haven't heard anybody in the last couple of years argue against that. And clearly, considerable effort has gone into planning the location and the desired attributes of that station. I do not disagree with anything that I've heard, really, in the analysis of that situation. However, it's just as clear to me that the analysis of the problem failed to generate a proposal for action that was viable. The design process failed to generate a proposal that voters were at all likely to endorse, or that was consistent with state law. So in the procedure that's mentioned in the frequently asked questions that were put on the website last week, there was a very brief sketch of procedures, and they're pretty much what we saw before with some slight variation. 3 steps were mentioned, 2 of them are completely unchanged, the other one referred to possibly staging it. I suggest that the select board have the town administration provide to them a very robust description of what will be done differently this time, so we don't face what we did a few weeks ago, so that we can get a design that the voters will regard as affordable and that the state will regard as legal. I further suggest that one specific element in the new procedures that I hope we adopt, and that is to allow access by the Capital Improvements Projects Committee to the options that are under discussion as they come up. That is, right from the start and throughout the process. The CIP committee is in a position to place the fire station proposal in the context of other capital spending plans in the town. Given that our bond commitment represented by the proposal we saw was in excess of what was able to fund the fire station, it clearly would prevent us from, at that scale, prevent us from doing any of the other projects that we have in mind and have been discussing for some years. I would suggest there's one other option that we ought to explore in the new procedures. Last time we met, the select board, one of the members of the select board suggested that there be a third party, an independent kind of reviewer involved in the process all along the way. And we were told at that time that this warrant article would not permit that. Perhaps the warrant article was in draft at that point, but when I read these words, I see nothing that would prohibit us from including more than one entity in the performance of this activity. So I would hope that we would consider at least the possibility of going back to that proposal from the select board. Thank you.
Thanks, Carl. Anybody else have their hand up? Carol Nelson in the back.
Oh, thank you. Yes, Carol Nelson. Nicole, can you go back to the previous slide with the numbers on it? If my memory serves me correctly, when we were here last time, the 2021 assessed valuation was close to 900 and some million.
Mm-hmm.
So it went down?
It didn't go down. This number reflects that assessed valuation, but less the exemptions and credits that we are expecting.
And there was some talk about TIF money? Was that?
That was resolved.
It was resolved?
Yes.
Okay. But doesn't this lower number then mean we have less ability to bond a certain amount of money?
Yeah, so this is the number for the 2021 year. So we're working with the 2021 assessed valuation. This is a number that changes every single year. So it does lower the amount that we would be able to bond entirely this year. Next year, it may be a little bit higher. Next year, it may be a little bit lower. It really depends. That calculation is redone every single year.
Okay.
It's incredibly complicated. To get to that assessed valuation is incredibly complicated. There's a lot going into that. But that's what it is this year, so that's what we're working with this year.
Thank you.
Yep.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, Dewey Clark. I guess I have questions about the whole process. I'm not clear how we go, I mean, it's going from 6,000 to 30,000 square feet. Right, that was the proposal. And it's not clear to me how we make that 500% jump. What were the needs that went into that? What was the expectation for what's going to be required 5, 10 years from now? I saw none of that. And to just dump, a 30,000 square foot facility, I mean, that's a big facility, on the town, there are municipal fire departments that don't have a facility that size. So I'm not sure about, I don't understand that. And I'm not clear why we can't use the existing building to house some aspect of the Peterborough Fire Department, whether it's the ambulance service, whether it's a storage facility, or whatever, to reduce the needs with the new construction. And then the new construction can be staged too. So those are my concerns.
I'll address the first piece of it. The building we're currently in was constructed in the 1940s as a DPW garage for the town. The fire department moved into that building in '72 when they moved out of the original fire station on Main Street. At no point in time was that building designed around the needs of the fire department. It was handed down to the fire department as an improvement over where they were. The evolution to the square footage that we have now has been an evolution since the dawn of Peterborough Fire and Rescue. If you were to go back, and I apologize, I don't know if you've looked at, but if you were to look at the peterboroughprojects.info website and look at the historical information going back as far as 2004, when the town originally undertook a study of all municipal facilities, at that point in time, the facility that was proposed was around 18,000 square feet. So really, when you look at our jump is a jump from 18,000 in 2004 to the 30,000 in 2022. It really isn't a jump from 7,000 because that was never an adequate facility. In those intervening years, a few things have changed. One, for example, in 2004, we did not have anybody staying in the fire station 24 hours a day. The single ambulance that responded to, at that time, I'm going to guess, and John back me up, probably around 500 calls a year.
72, the first year was 300 calls.
In 2004, it was probably around 500 calls.
Probably about 500 or 600
around there.
calls,
Now our 911 ambulance service is doing almost 2,000 calls a year. And we have 4 people in that building 24 hours a day.
Where are those ambulance transports going?
So the majority of our patients go to Monadnock Community Hospital. They're coming from Peterborough, Sharon, Dublin, Hancock, Francistown, and Temple, which are the towns that we have contracts with outside of Peterborough. The majority are going to Monadnock Community Hospital. In addition to that, we provide mutual aid ambulance service to other towns around us. Jeffrey Inge Memorial Ambulance, Souhegan Valley Ambulance, Antrim Ambulance, Wilton Ambulance, when they can't get their apparatus out. We also do emergent and non-emergent transfers out of Monadnock Community Hospital. So last year, I think it was 953 patients were transferred out of Monadnock Community Hospital. That includes both discharges that require ambulance care, as well as patients going to other facilities for more definitive medical care.
Because you understand probably within 10 years, the need for transports from Monadnock to other hospitals is going to be greatly reduced.
Again, if you look at that as a percentage of our calls,
Right, that's the question.
We had email exchange back and forth about this. I mean, right now, last year represented about 950 calls. It was around 30% of our call volume was our transfer service. If we were to lose even half of that,
there we go.
It's not a significant decrease in our call volume. So, and if you're looking 10 years out, if you were to look at population and call volume trend, even if those 911 calls were to go down, the transfers were to go down, if you were to graph our 911 increase in calls, it would more than make up for it. So our overall call volume is probably not going to decrease.
Okay.
and looking at that. The other piece of that to look at, and again, and I realize this lays into the staging, and this will probably play more into where we go in the future. One of the considerations with this building, and we talked about the programmatic study that was done, a very high level, was understanding what potentially could be needed in both the fire and a police station, and looking at that so that when it came time, at some point in time, if we did move the police station up there, we weren't excluding anything. That may or may not happen as we go forward. That is still the goal of the town. If you look at the Evans Flats study, if you look at the Master Plan Steering Committee, if you look at all of that, was a consolidation of those services. You know, to Carl's point, that may not be viable at this point in time, or there may be further staging that goes into that. We don't know where that is. So I think that's sort of how we are. And there's a second part of your question.
Could the existing structure be used in
so
some aspects?
Nicole might be able to speak more to that. It potentially could be used in some aspects. A couple problems with the building. The building is failing. The footings are sinking into the ground. It's within the floodplain. The other piece of it from a tax perspective is that land is incredibly valuable on the tax rolls. That is downtown property. The Evans Flats property, I don't want to use the word useless, but doesn't have a lot of tax value. It's sandwiched between what's going to be DPW garage forever and most likely be a community center forever. So from a municipal land use perspective, and that was one of the things, again, going back to the Master Plan Steering Committee, was looking at the ability to take that downtown property, put it back on the tax rolls in the future, and look at that. Right now, the assessed value is between $700 and $800, I think, if I remember for that. I don't know if everybody remembers looking. And that's as it is with a,
Yeah.
80-year-old fire
That's gotta be
station on it.
demolished.
So, yeah. So that's sort of the long-term goal.
Okay.
Is that it? Is that-
Yeah, no, thank
okay.
you, Chief.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Clark and Chief. Those are good answers. Who's next? Carl?
Yeah, Carl Staley. So Chief, are you saying that the 30,000 square foot need is, you're thinking about the police being able to have room in that building?
No. The 30,000 is a gross square footage that meets our needs. One of the considerations that got us to that was certain things that may be utilized by both. So for example, lobby space, our training space. And as the building was laid out, and again, in the process for construction, you look at what your needs are, and then you look at sort of the adjacency things. So some of those things that may be co-used in the future, such as a building lobby, where you'd have to come into a central point, access either fire department or police department. A training room, which has easy access to fire or police. That dictates some of how that building is laid out, which dictates some of the gross square footage needs, because that affects what they call circulation. And there may be others here who can explain a lot more articulate than I am, but it's where your hallways are laid out, where your public restrooms are, and so forth, like that. So the 30,000 was a gross number, which includes wall thicknesses and circulation space, utility space, and the rest of that. Also, I think what's important to look at is the way we had envisioned this process. This first money we had was to get us to the point where we were going to hire somebody to do this next step. And the next step was included to Bill Kennedy's point, the next step had been included in that overall price tag we had. That next step will really get down and nail down exactly what those spaces are. When we looked at the layout that HKT did, not that it wasn't an accurate layout, but it was not getting into the very specific nitty-gritty of it. It was, okay, we've identified this much administrative space, this much living space, this much mechanical space. Let's put boxes, see how they fit. So this very well may reduce, and again, it may not be a significant reduction, but 2,000 square feet at $400 a square foot isn't nothing as we go forward.
Well, my concern, I don't know Carl, I like the name, but I'm coming into this as someone who's been a resident here for a long time, and I've heard about this process, but until I saw the $23 million price tag, it didn't really mean that much to me. So what I see is a price tag, I agree with Carl, that I do not think the town voters are going to go for a number like that. So what concerns me about the 2 million that we're going to do is that the 2 million is going to go into a, engineering and design plan for this $23 million project. And at the end of it, if we then put that project up to a vote, and it's voted down, we would have spent $2 million potentially for nothing. So I just think we've got the cart before the horse.
So if you look at one of the things, it won't be a $23 million project, because one of the things that we discovered as a community was that's above our ability to bond. So, and Nicole might speak to this more, but as we go through this process, one of the things we're going to have to determine, and I think that was a big part of Carl's point in working through CIP and working with the select board, is how close to the maximum amount on our credit card do we want to get? To give an analogy people can understand with. If our bonding capacity is X, how close do we want to get? So part of that will, and I hate to use this phrase because it gets away from meeting the programmatic needs of the department, part of that will end up really backing us into a program, because we will be forced to back into something that is within the financial constraints of the community. So in the end, it cannot be a $23 million building. We've already demonstrated that. So we are going to be in a position where we will be we will be proposing a building and coming to the voters with a building that fits within whatever budgetary constraints the select board feels appropriate for a total bond limit and the capital committee feels is within there, so that's part of the process.
Yeah,
Did you have that number
yeah,
there?
well, there's a little bit more in there too. I think, this is also giving us an opportunity to, again, we're gonna reach out, we're gonna try to get more grant funding. We're gonna continue just working on our congressional delegation to try to get these grant programs that don't exist currently in place, but are being introduced into Congress. We're gonna work on it, again, this will come after this discussion's over, but one of the things we're gonna be asking for is a congressionally directed spending request, which will hopefully help to subsidize some of the cost of this overall project. We know what we need. That's what the town has asked us to work towards. I think it's important to back up for a minute, just to, again, remind folks how we got to here, because it is a multi-year project. This has been going on since either Chief or I were hired. So this, if you step back, there's been a number of groups that have worked, on what are the needs of the facility? What are the needs going to be for this facility, not just for now, but in the future? What does this town actually require of this ambulance service? What is it going to require into the future? The fire department, as of today, has been in that building for 50 years. The expectation is that they're going to be in the next building for at least 50 years. What do they actually need to make sure that that building is going to serve them successfully for the next 50 years, and that what we're making is a good investment? It could very well be that at the end of this whole discussion, at the end of the planning process that we go through with the next set of architects and engineers, and eventually a construction manager at risk, may come out that the project is still going to be $23 million, or $23 million plus 5 or 10%, or less 5 or 10%. Who knows? But that's going to be the right project. Then it's going to be a matter of if we can gross appropriate that much, but then offset it with grant revenues, offset it with capital reserve funds, offset it with fundraising, or wherever else those funds come through, can we get to a number that the town can comfortably bond?
Can I ask for a clarification? I'm sorry, Carl.
Sure.
The programmatic studies, are we suggesting that we're going to go back and reevaluate our needs?
So it's not so much reevaluate the needs as clearly look at how we can best utilize space to meet those needs. Because again, what was done before is not a final look at, we didn't get down to, literally how many bathroom stalls do we need in the public restroom? Where are our doorways going to be? Where are our stairways going to be? We didn't look at that. And again, when you're looking at $400 or $500 a square foot, saving 2,000 square feet is a lot of money. And that is part of what goes into the final design. And that was something I think that we lost in communication.
But it was the programmatic study that was the basis for the number of square feet that we were allocating.
Correct.
The gross square footage.
Gross square footage, and therefore, we need to consolidate that in some way. in order to achieve our economic goals.
Yeah, so the question really becomes, really, what can you overlap?
Yeah.
What can you shorten down a little bit? What you can narrow up a little bit?
So it is subject to reevaluation.
Absolutely, yes.
absolutely, yeah.
Carl, you wanted to follow up?
I just want to follow up, yeah. Nicole, did you look at any other fire departments in the state that were doing projects? Because I
Yes.
did a short little Google search. Summersworth did one that came in 2021. They built an 18,280-foot new building. It cost a little over $9 million. It's 11, they have 11,000 plus people there. I'm not getting, I understand, I don't know that building has anything to do with their ambulance service, but is the ambulance service driving us to, another $8,000 or, whatever, $5,000, $5 million?
So I think what really sets us apart from a lot of the other projects is the geography of where we are and the services that we provide. So I spoke not with Summersworth, but the Northampton town manager, and I spoke at length because he was also putting a project forward at about the same time. They were looking for something much smaller. His service is completely different from ours. They have a small full-time round-the-clock staff. They don't run a paramedic level ambulance service because they don't need one. They're right next door to Exeter, they're right next door to Rye, they're right next door to Portsmouth. They don't need to have a ladder truck parked in their garage because they are right next door to Exeter, they're right next door to Rye, they're right next door to Portsmouth. And when they need those things, they're able to call them through mutual aid. And vice versa, when those companies need coverage, they're able to send their firefighters over just a couple miles away to park, in their driveway and provide that coverage when there's another fire going on. They have, because there are so many full-time services, so many well-equipped services in that region, they don't need the same build-out that we need here to provide that coverage. And we're not designing to meet every single need either. And the chief can provide you with a list of the equipment that other communities around us provide to overlap. We rely on them for mutual aid just as they rely on us for mutual aid. We do provide an ambulance service that we're able to serve multiple towns with, but to be perfectly frank, there is enough call volume just in the town of Peterborough alone that would require us to have the ambulance service that we have anyways. We wouldn't be cutting a whole lot out if we were only serving Peterborough residents, Peterborough businesses, and the hospital located here in town.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Clark, I'll circle back to you once we've heard from everybody that someone that hasn't. Yes, Mr. Cox.
Yeah, I looked at the 2,900 calls you take every year. If you divide them by the number of patrol shifts, that's only 1.5 a shift. You're saying if we didn't cut out the other towns, we couldn't cut the number of people?
I'm confused, I don't understand the 1.5 per shift.
You have 2,900
100.
people.
calls.
You have 365 days. You divide them out and it's 8.2 a day.
Mhm.
You have 4 people around the clock. That's 1.5 per shift.
Well, the ambulances, so you have 2 people on every ambulance?
Yes, that's what I
So we have
counted.
2 ambulance staff 24 hours a day. If you look at those 8 calls per day, you're looking at
1.5.
is 1.5. And the ambulance utilization rate, and again, if you get into this, and I don't, somebody may even be here, actually somebody posted on Facebook a really good article on ambulance utilization rates and how that varies between rural communities and urban communities. I don't have the number in front of me and I can get it and we can add it to the FAQs if John reminds me. Our average call time for an ambulance is pushing up to 2.5 or 3 hours. So each one of those ambulance calls is taking an ambulance out of service between 2.5 and 3 hours. So when you look at that call volume per day, we're spending about 50% of our capacity is tied up on known calls. That's just radio dispatch time to back in quarters time. That doesn't include the time that crews need to restock the ambulances, to do their training and other chores around the station, as well as the fact that one of the problems with running the ambulance service is you really can't run at 100% capacity because we can't schedule our calls. We don't know when they're going to be. We need to ensure, and part of that is ensuring that we have the apparatus available to respond to those calls when they come in. That helps.
Your budget this year was $1.5 million. Don't you think that's a lot for the town of Peterborough?
Again,
For salary? I mean, that's not counting anything else.
when you look at where our staffing level is and the level of service that we are being asked to provide by our community, the 5 communities that we have contracts with in the hospital, it's actually not a lot of money. Our hourly wages are probably a little bit less than what some other services are offering in the area, than what Cheshire County is starting up as, and what some others are starting up as. We have been very fortunate to attract and retain the dedicated staff that we have, primarily because of the type of service we have, because we have been fortunate enough in the past to be well supported by our community, well supported by our hospital. Our folks, through the combination of transfer service and the 13,000 residents they serve, get to do some really neat stuff with the back of an ambulance that isn't done in a lot. So we're very fortunate that we can attract and retain highly qualified providers, with the salaries that we pay.
How long do our contracts last with the hospital and these other towns?
So the other towns, they're in perpetuity. They have an evergreen clause. They go in. We have been.
You mean we're stuck with them forever?
Nope. Oh no, we can end them at any point in time. But I mean, they don't have. There's not a renegotiate. We started our ambulance service in 1972 when the state of New Hampshire required that people be provided with care on their way to the hospital. That was when most of your funeral homes got out of slapping the red light on the hearse and driving them up the hill on Parmalee Drive. So we started doing the ambulance service then. At that time, we served 6 communities. We served Peterborough, Sharon, Hancock, Dublin, Greenfield, and Francistown. In 2020, January 2020, Greenfield went to Wilton Ambulance. In April of 2020, Temple came from Wilton Ambulance to Peterborough Ambulance. Those 5 towns that we serve are about 23% of our call volume a year.
How many? She said 38 last time.
No, though, out of the entire call. So you have 911 portion and you have our entire call volume. Out of our 911 call volume, they're about 38%. When you add in the transfer side, which was 953 calls last year, they're about 23% of our call volume. Again, this is not a term that you necessarily like to hear from a public sector, but applies in public safety, is that 23% is really, it's not a significant amount. That 23% is, again, I hate to use this word, incremental or sort of done with excess. We would not, if we were to lose those 5 towns, we would not be able to reduce our ambulance staffing because we still would have to make the commitment to the residents of Peterborough, which is pushing 1,000 calls annually, as well as the Nana Community Hospital. And the other thing that, and those of you who were here on the 15th, Laura Gingras, who's the VP of Community Relations for Nana Community Hospital and a town resident, spoke. And one of the things she brought up, and it is part of it, is a significant number of the folks that are transferred out of Medina Community Hospital are residents from our community, are residents that have either gone in by our ambulance or gone in on their own, or from one of the other towns that we serve. So the transfer service, although it is looked at and really run as a separate, separate cost and revenue center within our budgets, is an extension of the ambulance service. It is continuing to provide care to our residents from wherever they have their emergency to where they can get that definitive treatment. I don't know if that helps answer.
Sandy. Oh, yeah. Next.
Sandy Bebas. I'd like to say that I echo everything that Carl Staley said in spades. And I'm concerned at what I heard the chief say, because it seems like the main concern is to get the cost of the building down low enough so that we're at a debt level that the town is comfortable with. But I think that an equal problem here is getting the voters to vote for it. And you may get the cost of this building down to 20 million or 19 million, but if the town doesn't approve that bond, we've got nothing again. So I think there needs to be more of an emphasis, not on what we can afford, but on what the voters will vote for. And therefore, I think there need to be some very painful decisions made. And I don't see anyone here talking about making painful decisions. I think if we want a fire station, which I do very much, that fire station may not have everything it's going to need for the next 50 years. There may need to be some compromises, but at least there will be a fire station instead of voting on it year after year and having the voters reject it. And furthermore, if the building is too expensive, I can imagine these other towns that are using our ambulance service opting out because their share of the capital expenditure that they pay on a yearly basis will be so high that they'll go elsewhere. And then, sure, we still have the services we need for our town, but we'll be losing that revenue. So, that's my piece. I'd like to know what you're going to do to lower the cost of this building.
My turn now? One of the biggest problems that came out of the study that led us to this point is it came up with a figure of 23 million that everybody is completely hyper-focused on. That number was a very, very raw estimate on very, very preliminary information. And it was involved in that $23 million was making sure that no matter whatever happened, it would not be more than 23 million bucks. And now the number of this drives me the most crazy. I just said about 10 times in that paragraph. We're going back to a point where we're going to try to design something that not only, I mean, I get what you're saying, like we're going to have to make some tough decisions, but in the public safety business, what decision is that? Like how far we go out to save somebody's life? We're not talking about, you know, putting copper flashing on something to make it extra fancy. What we're talking about here is life-saving measures, and it seems easy. I mean, I'm here right now only because of the Peterborough ambulance service, and I know that for a fact. Hopefully none of you ever have to be in a position where you have to count on it. But if you do, we have one of the most amazing facilities and groups of people for anywhere, as far as I'm concerned. But the number of $23 million is not a number anymore. So we don't need to focus on that. Will it come in that high? We don't know that yet. But what we're trying to do is get a set of plans that maybe we stage. We start with an ambulance facility only. Maybe we start with a fire department only. But certainly the message is loud and clear. And I don't think there's a single person in the whole town or anybody that when they first saw the newspaper article that said it was going to be $23 million didn't almost faint. And that includes everybody on the fire department, everybody over here, everybody was completely blown away by that number, myself included. That much we can all agree on. Now we're in a position where we can design something that will work, that will keep our firefighters and ambulance people safe, our residents safe, the people that need to go from MCH to another hospital to get the right kind of treatment. I mean, I don't know where the information came from that you, Mr. Clark, said that that's going to dramatically reduce. I mean, it's because of the nature of joining up with Garbage Hitchcock and CMC.
Should I answer that?
Sure.
Yeah, please.
Yeah. It's public knowledge that MCH is merging with Dartmouth and Granite One. They are part of Granite One right now. And probably within 3 or 4 years, the merger will be completed.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And the idea is, from Dartmouth's point of view, is to bring people down, is to have a place to put residents And then with the telemedical health, they would be able to guide current physicians through treatments that they can't currently do now. But the idea is that eventually, right now, you know that Monadnock is bound by its community access designation.
Mhm.
That limits it to 25 beds and a limited number of services. When they go with Dartmouth, they can probably break that. And then it will be, a lot more services will be done there, like oncology. You know, it'd be ideal, as we have said, to treat people within their own community.
Yeah.
So that, you know, but Chief already handled that. Yeah, he said that transports to other hospitals for definitive care is a very small percentage when you look at everything.
Right.
So I don't think, but, you know, the merger to me is a big deal for Peterborough.
I think that's great. I don't think it changes the nature of emergency services.
And I don't think, no, and I don't think it changes the transport. You know, well, it does change the transport picture, but it's on the margin.
Yeah.
You had a follow-up question?
Yeah, while I'm here.
Yeah.
Chief, all right, so you're running into the immovable object of taxpayers saying, nah, 23 mil ain't gonna do it. All right, 23 mil was based on 30,000 square feet.
Is that number again?
Right, there it is.
But it's there.
So,
But it was put out. Yeah, all right, but let me finish the premise. And so you got that, and you said the 30,000 square feet was based on programmatic needs. All right, when you know, anybody who does anything with construction, you hit the reality of, okay, I can't do everything I want. Has a prioritization process begun on your programmatic needs? And I think that goes central to a lot of what is being asked.
The $23 million is reached at by a number of factors.
No,
let me just get, one of them was inclusion of a lot of site and engineering, a lot of design and engineering construction work for the site itself. If you remember looking at that slide, it included driveways, parking, and other things for the community center. That was the total of about 1.7 million, I think, was in that, if I remember right. It also included all the contingencies. The other thing that it included was, from the get-go, a desire to look at a type of construction and type of utilities that could give us the maximum value for lifespan. For example, it is poured concrete with brick veneer.
Right.
So there are other options, and this is part of what we will do, knowing, again, with the construction cost. You could look at maybe a Morton-type building, which is your metal skin building with a metal roof for your apparatus floor, which can knock a few $100s off your per square foot. However, it also gives you a 30-year lifespan instead of a 50 to 70-year lifespan. Lifespan, that could be an option. The other thing, and Nicole brought this up, and she was far more eloquent in explaining it than I was, that gets to your final point, is also looking at, do we end up where we are phasing what we're doing for the fire station, or for the fire and ambulance department also, not just phasing the site. So to your point, do we wind up with something now that addresses these immediate needs? Because frankly, right now, anybody who's been to our building or read the materials understands the immediate needs are the health and safety of the fire, of the EMS personnel that are there 24 hours a day.
Right.
That is the immediate need. So along with that immediate need too, is making sure that we have the space to conduct the other operations that we are not able to conduct in a safe fashion, such as for firefighters, deconning our gear and keeping it separate from, all the other carcinogens that are around us, storing our EMS equipment and stuff like that. Those are the first priorities. I think to go back to, the point that we made when Bill was speaking, the money we spent on HKT is not lost at all, but there is a pretty hard reset on this project. Is that a fair way to put that? There's a pretty hard reset on this project.
Which is a natural point that we're at anyways with a project like this.
So we are being forced, and again, I'm not proposing that we pick that maximum number and work towards that number. If we were to come up with an $8 million building that had a lot of things in it that the taxpayers in this town felt did not add value to the service they are getting, they're gonna vote it down. It is a match between the total dollar amount and the impact that has on the taxpayer and what it does to meet the needs of the taxpayer and the residents.
So, my question is even coarser than that, crasser than that. If, say it was a 20,000 square foot building, what programmatically would you be giving up? Have you been able to prioritize like that?
No, we haven't, because that was not what our original mandate was. Now that we're in that point, yes, we will absolutely have to look at that.
That's what I'm
That
asking.
will be a big, and I think to go to both the point Carl was trying to make and that Bill was trying to make is beyond just what do we prioritize from a building perspective, what do we prioritize within our program?
Yes.
So really take that one step, back that up even one more step. Okay, this is the chunk of what we do, this is what we need to do it, let's evaluate this chunk first.
Yes.
And I think that was sort of the essence of what both Bill Kennedy and Carl Latino were trying to say was, if we're going to take this hard look, let's take a hard look at what we do as an organization, because everything comes out of that.
Because it almost came across that the 30,000 square foot was a wish list.
It wasn't.
No,
I understand, yeah.
You know, and so now that we, you know,
Yeah.
but I hear what you're saying,
Yeah.
and that comforts me.
Nicole does want to add to that, but I'd just like to say that I wasn't surprised that it was $25 million.
Yeah.
That's
what I said, Nicole,
Right.
the first article was 25.
Yeah, to be truthful, looking at the program needs that were specified and then looking at the designs and how, and I'm a carpenter, I know how expensive it is to build things. Right now, looking at the way the economy is, the gas over $4, inflation is so high right now, it's not surprising. What's surprising to me is that more people don't realize how valueless the dollar is and what you get for your money. And I have to be honest, what really irks me in all the correspondence we've heard is people saying the fire department put out a wish list of all the bells and whistles they wanted.
Sorry.
And you're not alone in that.
But I didn't mean it like that either.
Mr. Staley makes a good point that he wasn't really thinking about this project until he saw the $25 million newspaper article. And most of the town haven't. People are busy, people are not involved with this day to day or over the years, you know, and a lot of people just don't think about how a town government works and how a municipality has to work and fund these projects as a community and as, you know, I could never build a $25 million house, but as part of a community, we can possibly build a complex like that is going to be, and I've said it before, the largest project Peterborough's ever done. And as a community, it's going to be spread out over the people that own $1 million houses down to the people that own $200,000 condos, and we're all going to be chipping in the share that we have to get the facility that the town needs, not a wish list that the firefighters want. That's really not. We have to stop looking at it that way, and I would encourage more people to get involved with committees like the Capital Improvement Committee and the Master Plan Steering Committee, and going to every, you know, economic development. All of these meetings are available to be viewed or are available to be at. And then I've heard several questions tonight that have been addressed previously, and it's understandable that information could have been missed, but please, everyone, go to the town's website and look at select board meetings for the past several months, year. Look at the videos that are archived on Channel 22 and on YouTube, YouTube. And we have a packet every time we have a meeting that has correspondence. There are several letters we get that are always answered by someone, whether it's the select board or town administration, with great questions and great answers. And that's how we'll get a great project, is through this correspondence and, you know, through this kind of dialogue. What did you want to add?
Right, so there was at one point a concern expressed that, you know, we're going to go through this design process, the town's going to vote it down, and then we're going to be back with garbage, and, you know, we will spend $2 million on nothing. again, I have to go back a little bit in time. In 2008, we had gone through a design process for the Main Street Bridge project, and then that process was halted. And then 10 years later, we brought it back. And we went to town meeting, and there was a vote to approve and to move forward through with the design process. And then at the end of that design process, it was found out that the town had not been able to raise and appropriate enough money based on the previous estimates. And so it went back to town meeting again. That project, I think, went to town meeting in total 5 times, if you go back over the years. There's none of the work that had been done previously was for naught. Every piece of work along the way moved that project forward. The same thing happened with the wastewater treatment plant. We started with a proposal that went through many iterations, many variations because of the amount of exploration and understanding of, the topography, the wetlands, how all these things work together in addition to the wastewater needs of the community. And then that was put on hold and brought back and redesigned and moved forward again, and was ultimately funded, thankfully, with ARP funds, again in 2008. Interesting, that number keeps coming back up, 2008, 2009. And it went forward. These were big, complicated projects. They don't go through necessarily all at once the first time. So any design that we come up with now is a design that we'll be able to bring back out again, look at again and say, okay, maybe it didn't make it through town meeting, in 2023 or 2024, but now we've got new funding opportunities. Let's put it back in front of the estimators. Let's put it back in front of the engineers, make sure it's still meeting code, make sure it's still meeting national fire requirements, making sure it's still meeting FEMA's structural requirements for a building of this type, that sort of thing. Get a new cost estimate and then put it back in front of town meeting again. This is how these projects work. It's not pretty, it really, you do feel like you're in the sausage factory watching it get made right in front of you every time we go to one of these meetings. And it does sometimes seem like, we haven't talked to enough people, we haven't thought through it, this way or that way. And sometimes we haven't because we haven't gotten to that part of the process yet. These things go in steps, it's public, it has to be posted, it has to be noticed, it has to be bid out, it has to be advertised, and it takes a long time. It's a very long, complicated process, and for people who haven't gone through it themselves, it looks like, it just looks completely mad. But that's how it works, that's how these projects work.
So Nicole, I just have one question. You said when you talked about this bonding, this $2 million, that you mentioned you might not even need it if something else comes through. Since it takes a 2/3 majority vote to vote this through, there's a high percentage chance that it won't go through.
Yes.
I'm wondering, are you going to feel like you still can move forward?
It will depend on a number of things. If the bond issue does not pass at town meeting, obviously the selectmen and myself will need to figure out what are the next steps. What would the select board like us to do, in the interim between now and the next town meeting? It could very well be that we get successful, I know this is kind of a fingers crossed thing, but we could get successful with a certain amount of the congressionally directed spending appropriation. And that might give the selectmen an opportunity to say, let's go out to bid, let's see what happens, let's see if we can get a plan in place before the next town meeting or the one after that we can get behind. Perhaps there will be some funding, perhaps not, and we'll be able to bring it back to the voters at that point. It could be that we do put it on hold. But the need's not going away. I don't think, I haven't heard a single person's room, again, say that that the town doesn't need this. The town desperately needs this, the department desperately needs this. They're in a sorry state over there. At some point, we need to have the conversation, if this doesn't pass, or if we find that we're having to put off this project over and over again, what will we be doing in the interim? We will need to look at that building and say, okay, how do we figure out how to make this work? If we can't move a project forward, what is going to be the cost to, replace the roof or to add on to the apparatus floor or do whatever it is that needs to be done? Is it possible that we can figure out some other way to, house the overnight staff or meet those needs somehow? But that's a conversation that I'm not going to start now because it's not the right time in the process. The focus really is on trying to get this bond through, to try to work on the design needs of this, future facility. And whether or not it ends up getting put on the shelf, short-term, long-term, at some point in the future, that's a bridge that, we'll cross when we get to it.
Can I say that, God forbid, that we put another dime into that?
Well, we're in a
Can I
classic
say it?
example.
Can I use the four-letter word?
Yeah.
Whole,
We have deferred a lot of necessary stuff. I mean, we have had roof leaks for the last several years that, Guy Roofing is like, yeah, you need to tear up 100 square feet here, replace the subroof, replace the insulation, and we'll redo it. But we're looking at hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Well, the next step I see is the roof collapsing on our equipment.
Yeah.
I think I saw Al Lennis and then the gentleman in the back and then Rick.
Could I just go really quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
Just to follow up, thank
Yeah,
you,
go
Al.
ahead.
Just a clarification on the ARPA money you mentioned earlier on. There's a tranche of money that potentially could be used there. I mean, could you give me a little more detail on it? And also, if indeed it's available up front, maybe that impacts the number we put here. If we know, okay, we have whatever that number is.
Yep.
Can you just give me a little more detail, please?
So, back about a year or so ago, federal government released the American Recovery something Act funds, which were sent down to the state. They were distributed per capita to every community across the country. We received our first tranche in May or June of last year. No, it was later than that, I'm sorry. It was August that the selectmen accepted it, but I think we had received a little bit before that. Which was a little over $350,000. We'll receive the second tranche of that this year. It can be used only for very specific purposes that were outlined in that. At the time that the selectmen accepted it, they earmarked it to go towards this project. We are going to need to use a little bit of that money already in this project to help support the ambulance portion of the bills that we already have. But then on town meeting warrant, we also have the establishment of an expendable trust fund that will house that money along with additional funds that we will be receiving this year, that second tranche or second half of that grant money. Those funds can be put to this purpose. They can't be put to this purpose immediately. We need to go through that town meeting process to make sure that they are set aside in a way that we're going to be able to, that the selectmen will be able to take advantage of that. So it's kind of just a matter of timing.
Is that
It's
number
really-
350,000? Is that the number, basically?
The total is $701,000 or something like that.
Two tranches, 350 roughly each.
Yeah.
So theoretically, we could take 700,000 against this
Yeah.
2 million if we wanted to?
Absolutely, the
If the
select
select board
can
wanted to do that?
Yep, they can do that.
This is just a thought to, get this number down and get things rolling. I just want to
Again,
throw that out.
the $2 million, you have to gross appropriate for everything. It's required by state law, it's required by federal law. So the whole project has to be gross appropriated, but that's why there's so much language in there. And a lot of that language includes being able to use grants or gifts or whatever to go against that total gross
Got
cost.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Al.
And then Al and Loretta, or the gentleman back and then Loretta.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I'm Rob Stevenson. This project, I assume there's only two things that have been settled and agreed to and are behind us. And one is the need for a new fire station, and two, the location. Is that accurate? Are there other things that have already been decided on this project, either through town meeting or selectmen's decisions, or?
No, not really. I mean,
Yeah.
those are the two things, those are the knowns. Everything else is subject to debate. And one of the best parts about this whole entire thing coming up really is that it got you people out here asking questions and watching meetings, because you really desperately need that to happen, whether it's online, reading meetings, coming to meetings, because the meetings started in what, June or July about this municipal campus, and they were all public. Anybody could have gone to them. I don't want it to ask for a show of hands of how many people did, but I mean, it's like, they've been going on for a long time, and all this information has been gone over for months and months, and we've gone over it a whole bunch of times throughout the budget process, and now through this bond process, so, you know, keep coming to the meetings, and keep talking to us about what, and you'll have just as much say as anybody else about how the project moves forward. That's, I mean, this is the part of trying to get a bond together and a program together that everybody can support, is that you guys keep coming out and paying attention to it and listening to what's going on. So, thank you.
Al, you want to finally go and then Loretta? or-
Yeah, sure. Excuse me, Loretta. I was here first. In view of the description of a hard reset, should there be language in the new appropriation that indicates that there's a phase here that we're going to reassess and look at downsizing if the square footage, not the money, I go more to the square footage. But should there be language in there that says, we aren't just going to spend the $2 million to build that same plant again? Because there's nothing in that language that says that. It says we are going to do a phased appropriation, and it will be appropriated to maybe respend the $200,000 or whatever it costs to reevaluate the square footage requirements. For example, I think the plan, correct me if I'm wrong, Chief, does include the chief's car and another car inside a bay. Now, I'm sure a lot of fire stations would probably debate that, and we don't have to go for snow days and things like that. But it's things like that we'd like to see another picture of, that will then indicate is 30,000 square feet, which is what we're talking about here. We're not telling anybody in this application that it's nothing other than that. So I think we need, it's my opinion, that I feel more comfortable as a citizen saying, this is a phase 2 million, describe how the 2 million is going to be broken down, and that we recognize the need to have a hard look at the numbers. And it may not, I don't know how to word that, I can't word it right now, but I'm saying, is that something we should be considering? Because right now, the language says you can spend 2 million.
I understand exactly what you're saying. The language is more or less written by bond counsel. So that is the language that is acceptable to council. It's a language that will be acceptable to the bond banks and anyone purchasing those bonds. So it's very specific. It's very
But to the
specific
citizens,
language.
excuse me.
Yeah, it
But
says.
to the citizens,
design.
it could look a little different.
And that's, but
And I'm
that's.
speaking as a citizen.
Absolutely, and I understand that, but what we put on the warrant at town meeting, and I'll just throw it up here so that we all have it in front of us. What we put on the warrant at town meeting is very specific. It has to be written exactly this way. This is the way that the bond council wants to see it written. It includes everything that it needs to, and it doesn't include extra. Now, having said that, discussion at town meeting, if the select board commits to any number of those things that you brought up in town meeting, and then with that understanding, the voters vote in favor of that bond, that more or less commits the select board to whatever was said. We've seen that time and time again. So that is really up to the select board and up to how it gets presented. I think the select board is in favor of making sure that we are relooking at everything. That's what I've heard from the board over and over again, and that is what's going to happen. But the wording here really needs to comply with state law. It needs to comply with, again, what the banks want to see from us, what the bond buyers want to see from us. And ultimately, because we are going to be using federal funds, at some level in this project needs to comply with federal law as well.
And this is really about the money, not about how we go about putting,
Marketing it.
restricting, or marketing.
Yeah, that's
Sure.
what it comes down to.
Right, and the other point is, this will not be on the ballot, so this will be at open session of town meeting.
Yeah.
So we'll have to get more than 300 people that normally show up, if it's even that many that show up to town meeting. We have to get enough people out there to have their say in person, and we can debate all that on the floor as Nicole stated.
That's another reason, Al, for this meeting, is to start getting the information out. Like what Nicole says, that's the legal jargon that has to be on the thing that gets voted on, so that a bond bank will actually buy this bond.
Because I did
Well,
have,
our job beyond here is to sell it to the taxpayers. I hate using that word, but that's really what we have to do.
To work with the
It's like,
taxpayers.
we have to explain what we're going to be using this for, and part of it is this public process. You're absolutely right.
As a taxpayer, excuse me, you have to still want to know where the 2 million came from. What's it divided up as? I would be asking that question.
Well,
And I'm asking
I-
it here, actually.
I'm a taxpayer too, and believe me, I have the same concerns. And that, nobody over here is trying to bury the town or any individual. We all want it to be just as responsible as anybody that's voting on it. I mean, I don't speak for everybody, but I'm pretty sure that every one of us wants us to be, as cost effective and yet safe and cover our needs. But I mean, nobody wants to bury anything. We're all taxpayers here too. Some of us are big taxpayers.
Can you answer his question?
What does the 2 million constitute? I think that would be asked. You got the information about 10:30 in the morning, as I understand it, and at our meeting in the evening, it was $2 million. What happened in that process?
Absolutely. So in between, I consulted with Seth and with Chief Walker. Seth, because he's got experience right now in the construction market, particularly with Cold Stone Springs, but also the Main Street Bridge project. And he's very familiar with other large construction projects around the state. So the question I put to him is, what do I put in for an estimate? What do I put in as the amount that we will need to raise and appropriate somehow to get designing and engineering and a construction manager working on a final set of plans that we'll be able to use to build the building, essentially be shovel-ready at that point. And he said, well, what I've seen is it's really going up lately. It used to be that you could estimate between 8 and 10%. He said, but the projects that have been coming in lately, including Cold Stone Springs, have been at 12% of the estimated project cost. So we took just the estimated cost for the facility itself and for the site work that HKT developed and had estimated for us. I took out all the other stuff, so there's nothing in there for furniture, there's nothing in there for moving expenses, there's nothing in there for the other, the other soft costs. And I also took out the estimate for the solar array, anything that was related to that, anything related to geothermal, just the bare bones facility. And then that was the estimate, the 12% that I took the estimate off of. And they took a look at it and they're like, yeah, that's reasonable. That's a reasonable amount.
When you say that was the bond council?
Yes.
Will this go out to bid, this 2 million go out to bid, as I understood, we
Yes.
said in the beginning?
Absolutely.
So and what we get delivered there will we define the deliverables that we want in the 2 million to the bidders?
Yes. I'm not exactly sure what those bid documents will be written as, but.
The project will go, the project will go out to bid. So and again, and one of the
Design
things.
services.
Right, design services, one of the things that we've heard tonight is, are we going to front load that with a more in-depth study of what we do as an organization to help guide some of that? And if we do, then, that could be part of the process that the select board opts to go through. So I think that I don't think it's nobody can give you a breakdown of the $2 million, 100,000 would be for this, 50,000 would be for this, 250,000 would be for this. But the scope of what we're doing is, as Nicole just explained, if that makes sense. But I think that, between what the chair of the budget committee said and a member of the select board said, I think that a chunk of that may be also beyond the architectural scope of programmatic study. That makes sense.
Well done, Alan.
I have one more question. Try not to make it a statement, but a question, if possible.
Just say,
Just how we reflected at the end.
Are there any thoughts about politicians getting involved in setting up a state process or an authority to handle rural communities? When I say handle, I mean deal with the needs of rural communities for specifically these kinds of issues, so that they would build in a capital program for us, people like us, cities like us, or towns like us, to compensate us for the capital expense that we're going to put into this. And it makes it the taxpayers feel that, well, the state is participating in this like they did on the bridge, I guess. But more for a rural authority. Now, I'm introducing a concept that may not exist, doesn't exist perhaps, but I wonder if we could get the politicians thinking about that.
Yeah, I like what you said. I mean, we all have been working on that, me specifically. I mean, there's no,
Specifically rural communities,
we're looking
yes.
at trying to get money from everywhere, not just the taxpayers. The trouble with some of these initial conversations is it seems like we're just the ones holding the bag completely, and that's not the way we're going. We have to appropriate all the funds for the entire project, just like the bridge, just like the library, no matter how much money comes from public, private, whatever form of government. But I can tell you that, and I don't know how much detail I can really get into it at this point, because it's just preliminary conversations, but I've talked to two offices of two, right up there, politicians that, about, okay, so you were working with Cheshire County on them buying the Deluzio ambulance service, it's the Keene transfer service, because that's not a, viable private business anymore. So I'm talking with them to get the discussion going and bring those politicians here to see this facility, see what we do, see what the needs are at Monadnock and the whole entire region, and work that into them helping us with funds like they are over in Cheshire. So, yeah.
Love to hear more about that.
Yeah, well, I'll talk to you about it.
I want
when
to
know more.
remind you that, we have not secured any particular funds yet because we don't have a plan. We don't
Right.
have plans. And if we develop the plans through this bond, then we have some plans to show.
Well, we do have services that we provide to the regions,
Well, yeah,
and it
we-
costs us so much, and we know it'll approximately cost us something to
Sure.
service that area, and approximate capital cost, a couple extra bays, and other things that go along with it. We have a feeling for that, and that's really all politicians need to run on usually.
That's what my push has been, because we don't have anything concrete that's been voted on, so we can't get them to say, okay, I'll give you X amount of dollars towards this project, because we've got nothing in terms of the project at this point. Until we have this, at least we've voted on something that says we're committed to the project, and then, they can commit to us that they're willing to bring funds. And I mean, if ever there was a reason for them to
The
bring
community should
funds.
go along with them, and the community should understand that you're doing that, you're attempting to do that. That's important, I think.
I just told you.
Just captured on. Yes, Loretta, thank you for your patience.
Spread the word.
You're welcome. I have several questions, and one of mine is related to the one that the other gentleman was asking, and that has to do with what is the mandate going to be for the use of this $2 million? You have to put something out to bid, you have to define something in terms of the project. So what is it going to be? And what are the parameters that somebody would have to work into? I mean, is there going to be any mention of, like $23 million is the uppermost that we would even consider? Is there's something about the size of the fire department? Are you going to include landscaping and site changes for the community center in this discussion?
It's right in the first sentence, what it's for.
For the fire department?
No.
Municipal campus.
Municipal campus, fire and ambulance facility located off of Elm Street.
Right, but the plan that was presented to us had changes for the community center as well. So is that considered part of the municipal campus?
Yes.
So it is, so that would be included in this.
So
But how is
if we-
the $2 million going to be defined? I mean, what do you say to people in terms of getting them to make a bid? What are they bidding on?
So
Yep.
this is the next step. So the initial money that we had, the process we went through that got us to the figure that we had, that I won't mention. The figure that we had, that got us here, was the first step. That was the preliminary design phase. What would have come as soon as that was done, had we been fortunate enough to have something that fit within all the constraints that were on us and come forward to town meeting, this would have been the first step in that next part, which was hiring somebody to come in and do what's called the final design and final engineering studies to give us those construction drawings. So the ideal scope of the project has not changed. It is develop a facility for the fire and ambulance service, site the facility on Elm Street, and take into it the constraints and considerations the task force brought up as critical, which is separate access and egress for emergency vehicles, for residents who are utilizing the community center, and make sure we maintain access for the public using the fire station and for the DPW facility. That scope has not changed. We have just now moved this to a final design phase that should get us a set of plans. What has come out of the meeting on the, or the information on the 15th and this meeting here is another step that will most likely be built into that is additional consideration of what we do and what it takes to allow us to do it.
So that would be defining the size of the building, for example.
Part of it will define the size of, yeah.
And what exactly those needs are that have to be met, or how you could phase developing the municipal campus.
We don't, the answer to your question is we don't have the language for how the bid is gonna look right now because we don't even need it if we don't get this bond passed. The nature of that may change considerably between now and May, just like everything changed since the middle of February till now. I mean, the whole thing is flipped on its face.
I do have a question though about DPW. I thought the town had committed to a $2.5 million bond for DPW and that it had not been bonded yet. So will that be used with regard to this whole project, or is that currently being bonded? Is that bond?
Well, at the last meeting, we did discuss issuing that bond.
Okay.
So yes.
So, and that would be separate, what's the focus of that bond that differs so much from here, just the DPW?
That one is staying just exactly what it was voted and approved as. We can't change, so that bond was $2.5 million to renovate and do some other work for just the DPW facility. That hasn't changed, and once we issue that bond, we can't use that money for anything else than what it was actually voted on.
Okay, I
So
guess I
that-
just saw that as being part of the municipal campus.
It is.
It is?
It is, but it's separate.
It's on the
It's separately
municipal
funded.
campus.
It's
It's separately funded.
Whether or not those lines come together and some of the funds can be used to accomplish the same goal, not have not have the fire department, the community center, and the DPW all build separate things. Sure, maybe that, they might all be combined at some point. but
Which is why we hit the pause button.
That's
We
right.
did.
You have to stay by the letter of the law too, which is, one of the things that drives me the most nuts about this kind of work.
Okay, an earlier version
It's all
of,
gotta go by the rules.
an earlier version of the $2 million bond that was presented, I think, at the meeting on the 15th.
Correct.
Said that $135,000 would have to be raised and appropriated for the fiscal year 2023. But now it's $50,000. Is there a reason for the change?
Yep. It's because of the bond schedule.
Won't be making a full payment on it the first year.
Yeah, first year is a 50%, or not even 50%, it's a much smaller payment. You can see in subsequent years, it goes up to $431,000 and then diminishes after that.
Could you tell me again what the impact is on taxes?
It's right there, and it was included in the pack, and I see a copy of it right there in your lap.
Right here, it has
That's it.
what?
Yeah.
The last column. 6 cents, 18 cents, 49 cents, 49, 48.
And that's all based on the current assessed valuation. That does not account for any changes that may happen in the future, because obviously, as I said, and as we discussed very recently, the valuation will change, and it's very complicated.
When you
Can this
say the
bond be-
6 cents, is that on $1,000?
Yes, 6 cents on 1,000.
Valuation?
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
And I have one more question, because I'm confused about how much long-term debt the town has. I have one copy of information that says it's 14 million. I had a question in the meeting in November, and Mrs. Gilligan said the total outstanding bonds the town has, 10 others in addition to the 3 addressed. The total amount was $19,685,075. So why am I getting different numbers? Am I not understanding something?
Yes, there's 2 different funding sources. One is taxpayer and the other is user fees. So
Okay.
they're broken up by funding sources. So if the funding source is property taxes.
I have the exact number
You have
if
the
you want it
exact
for the
numbers?
record.
That'd be great.
Lily Gilligan, Finance Director. The total bonds outstanding, which is just the principal of all bonds, including water and sewer, is $13,222,547. The total interest owed is $3,809,323. So the numbers I gave you a couple months ago are totaled over 19 million, because that was before we refinanced and before we made payments in January and February on all of our bonds. So the total of the principal and interest is $17,031,870.
Okay, and how does that impact the limitation on what the town can bond now?
The limitations are based on how much general debt you have, not water sewer, at 3% of your assessed value, which that debt limit value is based off of our MS1 reported assessed value, but it is also adjusted by the DRA, and it is called a debt limit calculation on your value. So currently using those figures and this bond, it's going to range somewhere between, without knowing what the new DRA number is on our debt limit, if you are looking at the most recent approved from them was 2020, and then our current assessed value, it ranges somewhere between 14.6 million and 16.3 million available for future projects, if this $2 million bond is passed at town meeting.
Okay.
And if we use it,
Yes.
we may not use the full 2 million.
Just a quick question. Can we amend the bond at all? Can we say it could be 1.5 million? Do we have that possibility now, or this is written in stone?
Not until we get to open session at town meeting.
Thank you.
Carol, I saw your hand going.
Yeah, I thought Ron had a question.
It's not on the ballot.
Ron? Oh, Ron, sure.
If we could go back to the warrant article, I want to get back to something that Mr. Lenos brought up, and I thought, I'm sorry, Loretta brought up, and that is, I think it's going to be important to say to the voters what that $2 million, upper figure, is going to buy us. Or in other words, another way of saying that is, break it down. As a voter, I would like to know, how are we spending that $2 million? What part of that is going to go into architect fees? What portion of that will go to engineering? What portion of that might go to site surveying or permitting or any of that? I think that's going to be important to delineate.
We won't know until the bids come in. That's something that you learn through the bidding process. That is not, we don't know what the architecture fees are going to be until we receive a bid from an architecture firm. We don't know what the engineering fees are going to be until we receive a bid from the engineering firm. That's again, this is why this process seems very confusing and convoluted to most people who've done private sector work, because we really can't go out and find out until we've gone through this step of the process, getting authorization to do so.
All right.
Yes, Carol.
Now, let Al's hot and ready to go. Do it.
Oh, Carol, you're kidding. Go ahead.
I didn't want to get to this level of granularity, but because it's been brought up several times, and Bill said, well, what can we cut to bring the costs down? You know, in looking at the plan, I was really a little bit surprised to see that there is 3 meeting rooms planned. One, which will hold 50 people sitting at tables and chairs, which is much bigger than the room that we're sitting in now, I'm assuming. And there is over $1 million in office space planned. That was very surprising to me. And I'm wondering if either of those things can be reduced at some point.
Hypothetically, yes, we're not in final design yet. As far as the needs for those, though, I don't think they go away. We do need a flexible meeting room space that can be converted to an emergency operations center that has the backup generators, for instance, that we lack in this room.
So is this the EOC now?
Yes. Yeah, it is. And right now, the only space in the entire town that could serve as a shelter in case of emergency, at least town-owned building, is the upper hall. And that is incredibly limited because it doesn't have, it's only got the one egress on that main floor. It doesn't have the elevator. It's only got a couple of stalls. There's no shower space. There's no real cooking space. And so in the case of emergency, if for whatever reason, the firefighters, EMTs, any other emergency personnel needed to be here all the time, they wouldn't be able to be served within this building.
Right.
And then that, because you don't need an EOC, 365 days a year, that's also your training room space. So, they have an incredibly robust training schedule that all of their staff is required to participate in to keep their skills up. It's very important, especially when you have a lot of on-call personnel. They need to come in, be trained regularly on what's the proper, please jump in, I'm going to screw this up.
Keep going.
But, yeah.
You're doing great.
Okay, thank you. Let's take, for instance, the electric vehicles. When you come into a crash scene and there's an electric vehicle, what is a safe, where do you cut to make sure you extract someone out of that vehicle safely without electrocuting yourself or anyone else around you? There's constant ongoing training. That's what that meeting room space is for, and that's why it's sized for 50 people sitting at tables and chairs.
So where does that training happen now?
We pull the fire trucks out, which limits the time of year we can do the training, or we borrow space. We hold a lot of smaller meetings here. We'll try to get them in and out of community hospital. But again, the issue that comes with that is the ability to respond when we're all sort of in one place. It looks like a bad Shriner circus if we all go flying out of the Monadnock Community Hospital in our own cars to come down and hop in the fire trucks. And again, wintertime, we can't necessarily park them outside and look at that.
So one of the things that I noticed on your questionnaire that you answered for HKT was that EOC would also serve as a cooling center or a warming center. That to me is a competing need.
So usually your cooling and warming centers usually are not set up during true dire emergencies like, it's a short-term period of time. We have a few warm days, a few cold days. Usually it's not, it's not your long-term. If we were to get into a disaster that required operating of the EOC.
Ice storm of 2008.
That room is not big enough as a warming or cooling center for the
So
town's
you guys were
needs.
at the elementary school at that point, were you not?
We're probably looking at schools, middle school, yeah, SMS, because it has the ground level resources and access, and looking at that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
John?
Yeah, I wanted to address two things, and one, I'm going to stand up again because that's what I do. First, just as a point of note, we're already on call number 7 today, and we've got 3 overlapping calls at once, and 1 ambulance is on a long-term, over 3-hour out-of-town transfer. So just to answer that 1.75 calls per shift, it really doesn't work that way. The elephant in the room, as far as I'm concerned, and I was on the Municipal Campus Committee, is the fact that between 3,000 and 7,000 feet of that building were used for utilities, and that's because we were requested to make sure we had a green roof and push that stuff inside, so it wasn't outside for visibility. So if you add up the numbers there, it's a lot more important to talk about that kind of thing than it is the numbers of toilets or whether the chief's car is inside or not. Thank you.
Just, Nicole, how would you, if the bond gets passed, how would you put something out to bid where you think there needs to be a real kind of rethink? Would you be asking them, is that what would go out to bid? You'd be asking them, we have this one plan that's right here, we can kind of show you, and that there's resistance in the town for this level. Can you rethink this to give the same functionality, but that would meet more in the line that the town would be willing to vote for?
Sure.
So how would you do that?
So what we would do, and this is what we do with pretty much every project, especially with federal funds, you write the bid documents, they're very dry. And they don't provide an awful lot of information except for background. And there would be a link to peterboroughprojects.info, which is where everything is archived right now. So every study that we've done, all the work that HKT's already done, the work that was done by Warren Street, the works that was done by Michael and Wellers, all these other firms that have already worked on it. So they would have access to that. They would be able to look as far back in time as they wanted. And then, because like I said, the bid documents are pretty dry, they have to meet, again, a federal standard. We would be writing them to that, but then during the interview process, because you do an interview process every time you do one of these, that's where that kind of communication would happen. This is the kind of thing that we're looking for. These are the kinds of things, that have come out during our public conversations on this. If you're interested, the meeting minutes can all be found here. You can go watch as many of those meetings as you'd like. This is the kind of thing that we would like to see. And then, that would be, you would have an open house at the existing fire station. You would have an open house up at the site off of Elm Street. That's where all these conversations will happen. We'll be in those venues. Yep.
It's pretty similar to what you're used to.
Yeah,
Right?
looks like
A homeowner going to an architect saying, here's what I want to build. They don't say, okay, well, I want to build a 5,000 square foot house, and you can't ever talk to them again. It's going to be, this homeowner is going to be in their face the whole entire time, making sure that it goes.
Well, you see, for me, it's easy because the architect draws it up.
Yep.
Based upon what the owner wants.
Right.
And then I price it.
Yep.
And then I come back and give them what that costs. And they're like, I don't want to spend that much money. And then the architect redoes it. So in this case, I don't know what that architect's going to be because they don't have the information that's what's happened. They don't know that story.
I get what you mean.
Yeah.
We're working through that story right now,
Yeah.
though, but in the nature of these public meetings, we're hearing what everybody is saying, and we get to use that information in our discussions. It's like Nicole said, it's a messy beast. The nature of the rules and laws about using any public and federal funds makes it a completely ass-backwards way of doing things, and that's why everything is more expensive when you're a municipality or state or federal government. It's, I wish I could change those rules right now.
With that,
And the other thing too, is, again, every one of those interactions you talked about costs money. So, and the original goal, the original funding of the $200,000 at the town meeting 3 years ago now, did not have that money. This provides for that opportunity for that conversation. That is part of your final design process, is the ability to have those final conversations to get that down. Again, and one step even further back is, again, based on what Carl and Bill had said, and the architect may not be the one to do this, is that more in-depth programmatic look at what we do and how, because that is, same as your homeowner, what they want to try to accomplish in there drives what you design for them. Do they want to entertain 50 people, or do they want to entertain 5? That's how big your dining room is. And that's the homeowner version of programmatic study. And that's what we need to take a look at. I cut Tyler off, sorry.
It's just as important to find the money to pay for the thing as it is to try and nickel and dime a few square feet off here and there.
Which gets us right into the next discussion.
Why don't we work on getting the money?
No, I'm glad you answered, Chief, because I was going to ask if we could end the public hearing on this, because we will. Now, keep in mind, since all this project happened, or since we started discussing this, disregarding the Budget Committee, Capital Improvement Committee, the Municipal Campus Committee, all the fire personnel that were involved with needs assessment, we've only really heard from 50, if we're lucky, people. 50 people out of a town of 6,000. We're going to hope to get several hundred at the town meeting at the open session and have this very same discussion have it will be a very long discussion, and we'll hash out a lot about this bond and the project again, I'm sure. So, yeah, 50 people are gonna make a decision for the whole town if this is all we hear from. So it's really important to get everybody to start thinking about this, to start looking at those videos, like I said, and reading the minutes to these meetings, and then get out to this meeting so we can have a really, really in-depth conversation at town meeting.
Or even the easy way, you can watch all these on video.
Right.
You don't even have to read.
Tyler, I think this is going to be like the library. It's going to be packed. I don't think there's going to be 50 people there.
Oh, certainly, and that, hopefully, but we've only heard from 50-ish people so far.
That's typical.
Right, so when,
Just
and,
got the paperwork a couple weeks ago.
right, so.
Right.
So hopefully, maybe we should put in the paper $35 million project to get people out to town.
We don't have enough ambulances.
Yeah, please don't do that.
But that doesn't work for the school budget.
Anyway, I'm making light of it, but I think it's fair to say we can close this public hearing for now. But don't leave, because stick around and hear what Nicole may have to offer with this potential congressionally directed spending request for this project. Okay, so motion to close that public hearing.
I second it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Great, thanks, everybody. Great questions and decent answers too.
And now you can stay here for the exciting part. You all have to stay. No? Sit down, Bob.
We'll let anybody.
All
Okay,
right.
so what may we be looking at here?
So, interesting, in this last appropriations bill, Congress looked back in and President Biden signed off on creating or recreating what used to be known as earmarks. They are now called congressionally directed spending requests or community impact programs. It is 1% of the discretionary appropriations in the appropriations bill. Some of the money is given to the House, some of the money is given to the Senate. In the House, they have a much smaller, it's given to the House and the Senate, and then it's broken up. Half of the money goes to Republicans, half the money goes to Democrats, so it's evenly split. I have no idea where Bernie Sanders, I think he caucuses with the Democrats, so he probably goes there. So what happens is, and we actually benefited from this last year when Representative Custer's office reached out to us and said, does the town of Peterborough have any projects, particularly infrastructure projects? Oh boy, do we ever, and let me give you our list, which we did. Myself, Chief Walker, and Seth McLean brainstormed a list, sat in on a conference call with, and I can't remember the gentleman's name, from Representative Custer's office. And we narrowed down to the approximately $300,000 that we have for water main relocation cost associated with the Route 101-202 bridge work. We have a water main that runs right along there that needs to be moved. That water main is very important, particularly for making sure that we have enough fire flows in that south part of Peterborough. They took that and they said, okay, well, we'll see what we can do. And we didn't hear from them for months and months and months. And then finally, Seth received a call from Representative Custer. Well, this was right before Christmas, from Representative Custer saying, guess what? The money, that $300,000-ish appropriation, that is in the appropriations bill that is currently working its way through Congress. That does not seem to be in jeopardy, so stay tuned when that appropriations bill gets signed. And as you know, just a couple of weeks ago, President Biden signed the budget, the appropriations bill, and that money will be coming to us very soon. So that was fantastic. Now we've learned that it's not just a one-off. In fact, there is a lot of money available that is being distributed. Senator Shaheen's office has reached out to New Hampshire Municipal Association. They conducted a webinar not terribly long ago that reviewed the process that their office will be using. That includes this application. I have a blank, it's not filled in at all, application for this program that the select board has in front of them. And what I am seeking permission to do, or authorization to do, is submit an application for a congressionally directed spending request for our fire and ambulance facility municipal campus project. This would be going to, the way that this works is the senators all collect their requests, however they choose to do it. Apparently, some offices are not choosing to accept requests at all for whatever reason. Senator Sheen's office is and very actively soliciting requests. They'll take those, there's a certain amount of money that she has available as a senator from New Hampshire to be able to direct. Then that request, should you choose to move that forward, will be sent to the Appropriations Subcommittee that deals with that. For this particular project, because there is no dedicated fund anywhere in the federal government for fire or ambulance facilities at all, which still is mind-boggling to me, considering facility infrastructure is as critical as any other piece of infrastructure. It really best fits in the USDA RD program as the U.S. Department of Agriculture's Rural Development Programming. That's the same subcommittee that approved the money for the wastewater treatment facility, for instance. They also approve a lot of money for drinking water programs. Pretty much anything that a small rural community might need goes through there. So we're going to be, my plan would be to point the application in that direction. I am going to be using the sum of money not to be spoken of out loud ever again as a basis for the request.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And I'm gonna make the application for about half of that cost, less the money that we've already received from the federal government, because you can't use federal money to pay for federal, to be a match for federal funds. USDA RD programs are always a 40 to 50% match, so I'm going to be looking to make at least a 40% match, usually 50, sometimes a little bit more depending which program that you're looking at. So
Tell them it's 50 million.
Now, I did listen to another webinar today that said that they really want you to not be submitting anything more than $10 million. So I'm going to try to, finagle it. So maybe I'm just looking at the immediate facility and just the site work immediately surrounding it, and that will really get us into that ballpark pretty neatly. And then go from there and see if they accept it. There is, if you get towards the end of this application, they do have a project cost section, which I find very interesting, that they ask you to describe the project, why do you need it, what is, does it fit this, does it meet this, all these other eligibility questions. But then at the end it asks you, how much are you asking for? And then what are the minimum funds needed to initiate the project? The minimum funds, I think, is this $2 million. We need this $2 million to really get this project off the ground. The total project cost, again, that would be the full amount of the total project. Why is the amount requested different from the total project cost? I'll fill that in and explain all of that. And then do a cost breakdown, which fortunately we do have an estimate that we'll be able to provide them. That work that HKT did is going to go directly to this application and maybe enough to get us at least the $2 million that we're looking at needing to spend.
Right,
just
well,
to keep it
we
moving
got to
forward.
be in this application shooting for the top possible.
I'm going to ask for the whole thing. I mean,
Right.
But, as far as, answering those questions, I'm going to be very, very honest about it and say this is what we absolutely have to have. Because if nothing else, this is really going to get this project on their radar. With any kind of luck, this will come back around again in the subsequent year, and we'll be able to ask for more, to fund a bigger chunk of the overall project. But they're probably not going to want to see the whole facility project until we really are shovel ready, meaning that we have the design and the engineering and all those construction documents already in hand, ready to go. Because they'd like to see projects that you can put out to bid right now, for obvious political reasons.
Any questions from the board?
We've already discussed this in another context, so I understand the process.
Mayor, is there anybody that would like to speak against this first? Any questions? Yes, ma'am.
I understand the reference to the USDA funding. Have you explored, or would there be available anything from Homeland Security for rural communities, given the nature of this?
No, Homeland Security has equipment funds. They've got money for some of the equipment that the fire department will need to put into the building once the building's been built, but not building itself. No, there's nothing available there.
If you could please state your name, Ally's taking minutes from
Remotely.
remotely.
Mary Clark, member of the
Thanks,
community.
Mary.
Thank you.
Yes, Sandy?
So is this a situation where you put in your request and thousands of other communities put in their requests, and then there's a decision made as to which requests they're going to accept? Or do they take all of the requests and distribute the money proportionally? How does it work?
So in this case, it's kind of a two-step process. So Senator Shaheen has a certain amount of money that she is able to direct herself, a certain amount, that essentially has been, I wouldn't say appropriated to her, but, that she is able to say she's going to support projects up to a certain amount. And then that goes to the subcommittee, which really looks into the details of the proposed project and decides whether or not it meets what that subcommittee can appropriate money for, because of course that is also very tightly controlled by federal law. And then, basically rank each of the projects and then appropriate the money from there.
I guess I'm trying to figure out, is it a sure thing that we'll get something, or is it
No.
questionable? Okay.
No, not a sure thing at all.
Okay.
They rarely are sure things.
And do you have any idea how long it'll take to find out?
No. The only timeline I have is for applications. It's just, like I said, with the senator, the Representative Custer reaching out to us and then waiting many, many months as the appropriations bill worked its way through Congress. This will be a similar thing. So we'll be probably waiting many, many months to find out what the ultimate fate of that particular appropriations bill is. We will find out probably very quickly if the project is not allowed, though. They're usually pretty good at saying, sorry, we're not going to move that one forward, and letting us know. And then we'll have an opportunity for a debrief to find out why this didn't rank highly enough. What was it missing? What did we maybe make a mistake on? How can we approach it differently next time around?
Did I see other hands? No? Very good then.
You want to make a motion?
I'll make the motion that we authorize Town Administrator McStay to submit an application for congressionally directed spending requests specifically for the fire and ambulance facility design and engineering.
All enthusiastically seconded.
All those in favor? Aye. Great. I too. I three.
Thank you.
Oh, aye, right, because Ally's just only in the interludes, not in the
All right.
minutes.
Next order of business, do you want to briefly explain what's been happening with the Southfield properties so we can, everybody's
So
wondering what this even means?
Yep, many, many moons ago, the owner of development rights for additional condominium developments in Southfield, phases 6 through 11, went into bankruptcy. And the town, through an extended tax deeding process, acquired those building rights. After going through a 4114A process, the select board put those building rights out on the market and selected Mathewson Construction as the purchaser of those building rights. Mathewson has been working with the condominium association, because of course it already exists, the condominium being partially built, the entire site being partially built out at this point. He's been working with them. He's already built some of the units that have been up for sale recently. He's actually just today, went through minor site plan review on the Building 6 development rights that he just purchased from the town last month or the month before. So this is essentially the buying out the remainder of it. There's been a bit of a lag on these because he would like to separate, he and the condominium association agreeing would like to separate out into two associations, so there'd be one on the left side of Southfield Lane that already exists, and a new one on the right-hand side of Southfield Lane yet to be built out. But that process is convoluted, and it's taking a bit more time than was expected. So with 6 and 7 already underway, they're looking to extend their opportunity to purchase the balance 8 through 11.
Until they get that sorted out.
Until they get all that sorted out, exactly.
And that can happen within just a month for the transfer title?
They believe so. They've been working on it already for 2 or 3 months now, so.
Okay, what was our date to transfer title previously?
It was the 31st of this month, March 31st.
Okay, so a couple of days.
Yeah.
There's no reason we wouldn't want to do this.
I don't see any reason
All
not.
right, I'd make a motion that we vote to extend the transfer of title date of the remaining Southfield properties to April 29, 2022, and authorize town administrator McStay to execute all documents related to the sale of the same.
Second.
Further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Great. All right, next step.
Yeah, vote.
Finally. Chief Bernard gets to
Thank you all.
participate. He's been
Was he
sitting
here?
here
Yeah.
patiently.
Well, he was here for our safety shit.
Yeah, that's true.
In case the crowd.
So we're looking to vote to approve trust fund expenditures from the Police Department Capital Reserve Fund and the Albert Noone Fund. A brief description of what that.
So the Police Department Capital Reserve Fund is the capital reserve fund that we fund on an annual basis. And Chief can explain why we're asking for this, why we're making this request now. The balance of the request is for $30,000 out of the Albert Noone Fund for the community center's assessment work. That is the work that is underway right now to do the building assessment. The Albert Noone Fund is a trust fund that was set up by Albert Noone many years ago for the town's benefit. So it's very open-ended. But we'd like to use that towards this building specifically. And so this would pay that cost. And so we've got $30,000. Right now, I believe we have a few other invoices that are coming in, or is that
The contract is for $30,000. Exactly. So as invoices come in, as opposed to coming to you piecemeal with each invoice requesting a separate vote for the Albert Noone Fund, it would be for the full contract, not to exceed $30,000.
Okay, may I ask what the balance might be in that Albert Noone Trust Fund? And could these funds be used towards the municipal campus project that we just discussed?
The balance is less than $70,000, and I don't remember exactly how much it is.
I can go get the exact.
No, I mean, I
No,
can
that's
pull
fair.
it up too.
If it were several million, I.
Oh, no. We would already have earmarked that.
It has spent that already.
Can I ask, how much money do we have in the capital reserve fund currently? And after, if we appropriate this money, how much will we have left?
For the police department.
Right, the police department.
And we'll probably vote on these separately, but we'll discuss them together, sure.
Let me just pull the last.
Chief, this is what you talked about a couple of weeks ago, right? Found an opportunity to buy a
Got an
cruiser.
opportunity to pick
through
up
the normal
a vehicle
channels.
before we lose the opportunity.
Yeah.
McGovern Municipal sale should based out of Framingham, Mass. They were due to receive 209 police vehicles. Until last week, I was notified by them that the hybrid models are there and were not recalled on back order. It has something to do with the chips. These vehicles are being spoken for very quickly by a lot of the city departments in the greater Mass and Boston area.
You mentioned this is a hybrid?
It is not.
Oh, it's not, okay.
About approximately half of the 209 vehicles they had ordered have since been back ordered, the hybrid models only. And that has something to do with some of the chip shortages. But these vehicles are going quickly, and there are no dealers in New Hampshire currently who could provide us with a new vehicle. And this is part of the CIP plan, it's scheduled to replace one that's coming by.
So the Police Department Fleet Management Capital Reserve Fund currently has $54,679.43 in it. And the Albert Noone Fund currently has $63,974.56.
Sorry, I forgot the number. We're
32.
32 for the police.
Yep.
Total.
No,
$34,385.
no. That's the total cost of the
Total-
vehicle.
that's the
Oh, I'm sorry,
total of the vehicle.
$22,610.
Right.
And that's money that we were going to be using in the current fiscal year to replace our pickup truck, which has since been taken off the road due to safety reasons. But we cannot find a good used vehicle to replace that rate.
All right, you want to make a motion to? I'll make a motion that we vote to approve the trust fund expenditure from the police capital reserve fund.
Second.
All those in favor?
Right.
And I'll also make a motion to to approve trust fund expenditure from the Albert Moon Fund for Community Center.
Second, I'll second.
And all those in favor?
Aye.
Great.
Aye.
Okay. Is Mary Covington, has she stuck around and really still want to be on the Appoint?
Was she here at any point?
Oh, I don't know Mary.
She saw a little sausage being made tonight.
Well, I'll make a motion to appoint Mary Covington as a new member of the Affordable Housing Subcommittee of the EDA.
She was held in high regard during the EDA meeting, so I highly recommend that. Second.
Great. All right, all those in favor? Aye. It's always great to have people volunteering and joining these committees. And then finally, has any of you read the minutes from February 15th or March 1st? And with that, that's a motion to...
Motion to approve.
I'll second.
Oh, we have 2 seconds. All those in favor?
Aye.
Great. Well, thanks for coming out, everybody. Important questions and answers tonight. We lost all the fire personnel.
We lost them early.
We're not a call.
Yeah.
Great. Motion to adjourn.
Second. Yeah, they are. We're on it.
Thank you.